So you're thinking about moving to Seattle? Well, you've come on a good day. I'm here hanging out with my friend Vanessa. We're hanging out in the bar. We may have had a drink or two. I don't think you can see them, but they're there. And we're here to talk about what it's like to live in Seattle. Who are you? Tell everybody.
Hi. My name is Vanessa, and I'm a local lender here and a great friend of Rob's. And
You've been here all your life. Why have you stayed? You've left, you've come back. Why have you stayed in Seattle? What has always anchored you here?
Well, I have to say there's definitely plenty of reasons that I have stayed in Washington. Moving back just a lot of years. I grew up and was born and raised in Redmond, which is a east side versus west side, the east side of the Seattle area. And all my friends are here. My friends, my family is amazing, and definitely where my roots are laid. Out of all the places that I have visited and lived, definitely the most beautiful scenery. You can be up in the mountains one second, you can be out on the lake boating the next second, and then within minutes you can have both options. We have so many mountain passes here. You've got Crystal Mountains, Snoqualmie Pass, you've got Stevens Pass, Mission Ridge over in eastern Washington. Tons of great skiing here, which is something I'm new. I'm in my middle ages and learning how to ski with my two young boys, and it's absolutely hysterical. They've completely surpassed me, which is super embarrassing. But at the same time, it gets me excited to get out and doing things on the weekend instead of just hibernating.
Yeah, because you could fall victim to that and then months go by. East side versus west side, right? So there is a healthy rivalry. And for those people who don't know what that means, what does that mean?
Healthy rivalry, okay.
Or the east side versus west side.
East side versus west side. So I grew up on the east side. I live on the east side now. So that means basically the east side of Lake Washington. To get over to Seattle, you do have to cross over a bridge.
And a couple of tunnels.
And a couple of tunnels, which are fine. And it literally from, Bellevue to Seattle takes, 15 minutes?
If that.
10, 15 minutes. You literally cross a bridge. For whatever reason, it's like another planet just to get over the water. It's just, you've got city life on the west side, and on the east side, it is extreme suburbia. So I think for, people that do live on one versus the other, to coordinate, getting together, you do have to decide which side of the lake you're going to meet on.
Yeah, and I know my friend Jill, who lives in Ballard, she'll jokingly say, hey, if I come visit you in Issaquah, Rob, I've got to get my passport stamped.
Oh yeah, oh for real, for real. It's a thing. It's a thing. So even though there's two, Seattle is one city, and then you have the east side cities and suburbs that are so close. Sometimes it is really interesting just to see when people do move here or come and visit. They're like, wow, that's definitely different scenery just crossing over the lake.
Well, and I think too, during the pandemic, when we saw all the businesses go to work remotely, you had this exodus of people over the past 3 years going from the city out into the suburbs of Issaquah, Sammamish, Redmond, Bellevue. And it'll be interesting to see when that switch flips back on and people start going back into the office more.
Yeah.
Will they start putting their big homes out for sale out in the suburbs and head back into the city?
Well, for some families, they have experienced that suburban life now, and they're like, oh, well, this is really working for me. It's a little bit slower paced than the city, and like we said, different scenery. I, for one, spent about 7 years living in Snoqualmie Ridge, and that was one of my favorite places that I've ever lived. Just a great sense of community. The interstate is I-90, which pops you right into Bellevue with just about a 20-minute commute, and traffic is a whole lot lighter than some of the other areas that you can live.
Yeah.
So you do live close to the mountains, which is nice in Snoqualmie Ridge, and really cool sense of community, lots of neighbors. You lost a kid somewhere after school and you're not sure whose house they went to. There's plenty of door knockings and cool parents that are like, oh no, they're over at Ethan's house or whatever. It was just a really, really great place to live.
And I think what I've noticed, and I'm a transplant, just to remind everybody, we've lived here about 12 years now, but what I've noticed in the communities on the east side, and probably on the west side too, is that if you have these communities, they're active communities.
Oh yeah.
If there's an HOA involved, there's community events, there's holiday events, all that type of stuff to really Seattle freeze. And you've heard me talk about this in a prior video. But Vanessa, what do you think about the Seattle freeze? You've lived here all your life.
I've lived here my whole life. I mean, I like to think I'm a nice, warm, fuzzy person. I don't know. I don't have very many people that don't think that. But ultimately, I just think you really get, you attract certain energy, right? And so, yeah, it's a little bit colder and rainier here in, the winter and spring months. Summer is beautiful. Fall, for the most part, is beautiful too. But I think part of it is just, there's certain communities maybe where people don't get out and about as much. Mm-hmm. But some of those closer knit communities, you're meeting up with neighbors to go for walks and jogs or to meet at a yoga class. You get to know your neighbors really quickly. And are there pockets where people are, maybe not the friendliest? Absolutely. But you're going to get that in any state.
Yeah.
So when you're in the suburbs and you're in some of these, neighborhoods where you're closer to your neighbors, I've never experienced that at all.
Well, and we're a perfect example. You and I, we met, a year ago?
Yep.
And we clicked instantly. There was no Seattle freeze.
Nope. We're like, you're my people.
You're my people.
You're my people.
So I think that's actually perfect, right? Is you got to find your people.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're open to meeting people and you're active in the community, there's lots of different ways that you can network with people, help give back to the community. There's a lot of charitable institutions around here that you can get involved in. HOAs, like Rob said, but the Seattle freeze is kind of just something where if that's in your head and you want to be frozen, you can. But I think if you're a warm and fuzzy, you're going to melt.
So we talked about east side versus west side as it pertains to Lake Washington and Seattle versus the suburbs. What about east side versus west side of the mountains, the Cascade Mountains?
Ooh.
What does that mean?
That is one of my favorite topics because I do love vacation. So for a long time, I owned a second home over in eastern Washington in a small community called Desert Air. And what's really cool about the two sides of the mountains, so west side of the mountain, you have oceanic climate, right? So you get the rain, you get the clouds, you get some of that, what do they call it, maritime weather? Is that the phrase for it? And then once you cross over the Snoqualmie Mountain Pass, you have high desert. You have more of like an arid climate, which makes it really conducive for people who are missing some nice shots of vitamin D and some sunshine. So there's lots of little pockets over on the east side of the mountains to be able to enjoy that climate. There's the Columbia River Gorge, where you can go boating, spend a lot of water time out there. There's golf courses, and again, just a different climate to enjoy all your favorite activities in. The really cool thing is a lot of these areas, it's literally 2 hours away from Seattle. Yeah. So you don't have to jump on an airplane and go to Palm Springs if you're freezing and you need some sunshine. You can check the weather, go over to eastern Washington for a weekend, go hit up some wineries, go hiking, go boating, whatever your activities or your little heart desires.
Yeah, and so when I first moved here, a lot of my colleagues that I was working with were saying, hey Rob, in February you've got to book your trip to Hawaii to get your vitamin D. What's that all about?
Whale watching season is what that's about in February in Maui. But really, I think for weather patterns here, it can be really interesting, right? So we know that Seattle is rainy. Everybody's heard that and knows that, whatnot. But October, fall, you still get a lot of heat going into the October, November. It starts chilling out, and we do lack some sunlight over the winter months. So I'd say, typically November through right about now, actually, right through March until daylight savings, it can get pretty dark and it can get a little bit cold. So
it gets light around 8 in the morning, maybe even a little earlier, and then 4:30, all of a sudden it's nighttime.
Right, and we're through the tail end of that, which is really nice.
Pop's quiz. This is an unscripted moment.
Yep.
We talked about concerts before we were on camera.
Yes.
So talk about the concert scene or just the venues that we have available to us in Seattle.
Oh my gosh, we've got some amazing venues. My absolute favorite is the Gorge Amphitheater. That is in Eastern Washington. So, a couple hour drive here from the east side in the Seattle areas, but beautiful, beautiful amphitheater that overlooks the Columbia River Gorge. There's lodging there, there's tons of VRBOs nearby, but I've seen some really great artists through the years there. You probably can talk more about the Seattle scene with the concerts in the Seattle area.
I mean, I know in a few weeks, which I'll do a video on, I'm going to see one of my favorite comedians. Her name is Sarah Milliken. She's from the UK. She's going to be down at the Moore Theater, which is a historical theater in downtown Seattle.
I love the Moore.
I've never been, so it'll be my first experience.
Okay.
I'm going to take these folks along with me. But then there's the Paramount Theater, right? Then there's other smaller venues, lots of opportunities for live music. But then we get to the bigger venues. And I'm going to admit, I am not a sports guy. We have three major venues, right? We've got Lumen Field, CenturyLink, and then Climate Pledge Arena.
And Climate Pledge Arena.
So I honestly don't know. I'm not making this up. I don't know which sport goes with which arena.
Hey, that's totally fine. And that's why I was like, I'm going to throw it to Rob. He doesn't know either. But here's what's so cool is, I mean, we have major artists, obviously, that come to Seattle. I mean, I grew up in the 90s with, Nirvana and grunge music kind of at its height. And so we have a huge music hub here.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm talking about grunge music, and I did try to get Taylor Swift tickets. That didn't turn out so well for me. I'm going to still keep trying on that.
She broke Ticketmaster.
I
no, you didn't. She did.
Hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
Well played.
Yeah, sorry. But there's a really great music.
So, like, what are your favorite touristy things to do?
Touristy things to do. Oh gosh, that's putting some pressure on, just because, again, I've lived here my whole life. So there's, I haven't done a whole lot of tourist activity. I'd say when there's friends that come into town, we're basically hitting up Woodinville for wine
100%.
country, doing some wine tastings.
And I'll be taking you along in the summer for another video, probably at a winery.
Oh, I love that. Okay, I'm always down for that, because those tastings are so fun.
So fun.
And there's some amazing wines, especially in that area. I did have family in town once, and we went on a Seattle underground tour, which was really cool.
Yeah, I've heard, like, we were talking about that last night.
Yeah, it's like haunted. It's haunted.
Yeah, and it's under the city.
It's there's an entire city under the city, so it goes through like all of the history, so many cool stories. I mean, it was years ago. I was probably, I don't know, in my early 20s or something when family came into town, but I'll never forget it because it was such a neat adventure. And there's, you're walking through town and you have no idea that there is so much history and an entire city under where you're walking.
Yeah, and it's funny, I've lived here for almost 12 years now, and 2 summers ago was the first time I went to the Space Needle.
Really?
Yeah, and it was after they've remodeled it, they've repainted it, and it is super cool.
It's beautiful. My 13-year-old still says that is the best cheeseburger he's ever eaten in his entire life, was at the top of the Space Needle.
Nice.
I'm sure the view might have had something to do with it, but he legit loves that cheeseburger.
Yeah, it's an amazing view. They do a great job down there, and I highly recommend going there. Don't wait a decade like I did.
Right. Maybe do that sooner rather than later.
Another one a viewer actually suggested was jumping on the ferries and going to Bainbridge Island for a day.
It's so beautiful. My best
pretty.
friend's mom has lived over there for years, and we can go visit her, have some amazing food because she's a great cook, and go hang out on her beach for a little while.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
Totally.
I know.
And the ferry ride alone is stunning. Even on a rainy day, it's pretty.
It is. I recommend on a sunny day, but definitely rainy day you can get there.
The summer, those ferries are going to be packed.
They are. You got to get in early if you're doing that. But.
So let me shift gears a little bit. You mentioned this earlier. As a mom of 2 boys, right? If you were moving here, what would you be looking for? You're thinking about school systems, right? Neighborhoods, that type of stuff. So what pops to mind with regard to some of those types of things that some of the parents might be thinking about?
Totally. I will say that our area, specifically the east side, has some of the most amazing schools. The schools are highly, highly rated. What is interesting is some of the ways that the boundaries are set up for housing anyway, that you could be on one side of the neighborhood and can be in one school that's rated maybe really highly, and then in the same neighborhood, literally same neighborhood, on the other side there could be where the boundary crosses and maybe a school is not as highly rated. So that's something that I know some people in years past have definitely paid premiums for housing if you're within certain school districts, because at the end of the day, you're not going to have to pay for a private education because the public schools here are so strong.
Well, and I think that actually proves the case for doing your research, right? If you're moving to an area you've never been to before. And a good website that I use all the time for my research is niche.com. You can type in the city and it gives you all of these stats like Vanessa just talked about. But also that's where a good real estate broker, it's a shameless plug, I'm gonna do it. That broker can help you out in identifying, hey, that house is great, but just know that it is over that line that you just talked about, and it's gonna be in a different school system. Is that important to you or not?
Right.
And let's talk about that before we go headstrong and put in an offer.
Absolutely. Good point. And I mean, another thing too, I'm not sure if niche.com has this, but also the walk scores. Some areas are a lot more walkable to, dining, to parks, recreation, that sort of thing. Some of the areas I've lived don't have the highest walk scores here in Washington, just because things are a little bit more spread out. It's really, really fun when you are in a neighborhood where they offer all the things. Like the school is there, the restaurants are there, your grocery store is there, and if you needed to walk or if you felt like walking, no problem. You just, 10-minute walk out.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you're
but
good.
that might be also another east side versus west side, right?
Oh, for sure.
West side, people walk everywhere. They may not even have a car.
Yeah.
Right? On
in
the east
city?
side?
Yeah, city, you may not need a car. Here on the east side, we're a little further out.
You need a car. But our public transportation is getting better, right? We're known for not having great traffic.
Right.
Right? I don't know. I just kind of grin and bear it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Why complain about something you can't control?
Yeah.
But they are expanding the light rail. It's almost going to open in Bellevue soon. Takes you all the way downtown. And they already go to the airport. And then they go north up to, I think, Shoreline.
I think so.
Which is a bit north of the city. So it is expanding, and those options are available too, should you not have a car. I don't know, but actually that you bring up a really good point, because a lot of the companies like an Amazon, a Starbucks, Expedia that are downtown, they do offer subsidies to their employees to take public transportation. I remember when I worked downtown at Starbucks in a neighborhood called Soto, which is south downtown, Starbucks corporate has a parking garage. Yay! Took me 4 years to get in there.
Right.
And there was a off-site parking lot, then there were shuttles, and it was like planes, trains, and automobiles just to get to the office every day.
Right.
So parking is a challenge is the moral of that story.
Right. You know what's funny is I do have clients that have mapped out their perfect location that have worked for, Amazon, Starbucks, whatnot, and they've mapped it by bike routes. Biking is actually a really great route of transportation, mode of 100%. Transportation here. We have a lot of bike lanes. And for people who do find themselves in a situation where it's 4 years to get into a parking garage, if it's, a 10-minute bike ride, what a great way to stay healthy, stay fit, and not have to deal with the hassles of the parking. So that's more of a Seattle situation.
Yep.
But definitely a lot more options, like you said, for commuting for the city versus the suburbs.
And those of you drivers, be respectful to share the road with the bicyclists.
Yes.
Unless they're riding 10 abreast.
Right. Well, then you still have to be really
Well, you do.
careful.
You don't want to hit them.
No.
But
that would be a bad day.
it might be a pet peeve of mine.
That would be a bad day.
All right. So we're about done. We're going to polish off this bottle of, what is it? What are we drinking?
I can't pronounce that, but I do believe it's a Prosecco.
It's a Prosecco, thank you. That was the word I was looking for.
You're
so
welcome.
We're going to finish off that and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks for spending some of your day with us. For all the stuff that we've talked about, I'm going to include links in the description, so be sure to check those out. They're a great resource. And as always, if we can do anything for you and help buying, selling, financing a home, our contact information is below as well. So please let us know. We are happy to help. Actually, that I think is what attracted us to each other as friends, right? Because we both have the same viewpoint in how we treat our clients. We want to find what's best for them. If it's not something either of us offer, how can we get them to that right person so that their needs are met? And I think that's what, I think we just instantly gravitated to, and we had similar values in that fashion. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, 1000%. Our clients are our friends, and we have relationships for years after, for forevermore. So it's not just a transaction for us, it's a relationship.
Absolutely. And if you want to know more, and if you like these videos, hit that subscribe button and tap that bell for notifications so you can be the first to know what's going on here in Seattle. So until next time, we hope you're well and stay safe and have a good one.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
All right, bye.
Bye.